Hi guys, it's Mariah. Welcome to Timberlake Online. Wherever you're at, I hope you've had such a great morning so far. We've got a great service planned and we're so excited that you found your way to church. We're going to get into worship here in a few minutes, but first, let me encourage you to grab your family, get your kids, and as we begin to worship, engage with us. We believe that the Spirit of God has the same ability in your living room as He does in the church building. If you're loving service, comment below and share the post as we continue to make heaven more crowded through this online forum. We've also started a brand new Zoom Hangout directly after service. Click the link in the description and join in. We don't want you to just see us, we really want to see you. Thanks again for being here and welcome to Timberlake Church.
this name that shakes the mountain tops, the only word that breaks the curses off. Your name, the one that covers all, it's higher than the other. Sing this name. This name that shakes the mountain tops, the only word that breaks the curses off. Your name, the one that covers all, it's higher than the others. It's higher than the others. Full of faith and wonder, I will say no other name by yours, name by yours. Full of faith and wonder, I will say no other name by yours, name by yours. This name that storms the gates of hell, the only word my life lived to tell. All the earth will bow beneath the sound. It's higher than the others. It's higher than the others. Full of faith and wonder, I'll say no other name by yours, name by yours. Full of faith and wonder, I'll say no other name by yours, name by yours. Jesus, 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 Jesus. Sing, there's power. There is power in the name of Jesus. Sing it louder. Oh, the name of Jesus. Yeah, there's power. There is power in the name of Jesus.
Good morning, Timberlake Church. Welcome again to our online services. We are so glad you made it. No matter where you're at, no matter how you're watching, I hope you know that we are still one church family. We're just one church family from a ton of locations. One of the things we like to say on Sundays is that we hope you feel at home in this house. So today, thanks for bringing us into your home. If you're new with us or just joining us for the first time, we're in the process of doing church in a whole new way through this season we're in, so we would love to know if you're watching. Jump online and visit our website or on the Timberlake app and fill out a connection card, or tell us in the comments where you are and maybe who you're watching with. Well, before we get into today's message, I wanted to tell you about the ways we have to give back through our tithes and offerings. At Timberlake, we believe that our tithes are an act of obedience and worship. We believe that when our resources are in God's hands, He's always faithful to use them in the very best way possible. Thank you so much for your generosity. We know it's an act of faith. There are a few different ways to give today. You can do this online through our website or the Timberlake app. You can text Timberlake CR to 77977, or you can give through the mail if you'd prefer that. Once again, thanks so much for staying faithful to this and for partnering with the church.
Well, hey church, welcome to Timberlake Online. Whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, whether you're at your house or in your car, in your bed, in your jammies still, whether you're with your family or on your own, hopefully you're not with your friends, I'm glad that you found us today. I think that God's got a good word for us today if we check in. We've been in this collection of messages the last few weeks called Never Again, and I wanted to talk to you for just a few minutes on the perspective of being stuck. This is literally the most stuck that any of us have ever been before. We were driving the other day and we kind of concluded that the only time that I'm ever actually home for an entire day is right after surgery. I said I need somebody to cut me open, to pin me down. I'm a mover, right? This has been brutal for me. I think my favorite part though for this entire thing is how much it's actually changing us. As a society, we're learning to adjust to being stuck inside. And for a lot of us, being stuck inside is the best thing that's ever happened to us. We needed it, right? We're changing routines and we're changing habits. We're renovating things in our homes that needed to be renovated years ago. Everything's changed. Quarantine beards are popping up. Right? Somebody sent me a picture the other day of these 3 SUVs kind of strategically placed at the high school with their hatches open, and it was just guys having guide time from their respective vehicles. Like things are changing. I was driving by Sherry's the other day, the restaurant, and I had this overwhelming, desperate feeling to go inside with my friends and have a milkshake. It's not even something I normally do, but things are changing. I think that through this, however long this takes, we come out different on the other side. We have a different perspective on the other side. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people where in the conversation someone tells me everything looks different on the other side of this. We're seeing churches they're being forced to evolve. We as a church are being forced to evolve. You know, I love getting on Facebook on Sunday mornings. My entire Facebook feed is filled with church services from around the world. And they're all making impact, and they're making impact digitally. You know, generosity has changed. I had a friend post on his Facebook the other day to encourage his church in their generosity, and he said that he was due for a haircut, as we probably all are getting to that point. And he said that he couldn't go get a haircut because his barber is quarantined as well. So he simply sent his barber the money that he would have given him had he gotten a haircut. Generosity is changing. Send money to your barber. Send money to your hairstylist. They need it too. Figure out new ways of being generous. At the same time, we have this incredible ability to be stuck while we're stuck. We get stuck while we're changing. I think the common dialogue and conversation in this season of life specifically, it always goes back to fear and anxiety. And yes, that stuff is happening. We kind of talked about that on Facebook Live the other night if you were on there. But we face fear, when we face anxiety and panic and stress and frustration, all these things that are happening around us. And I also think that, I think we need to combat that stuff. But in the combat against fear and this development of a new normalcy, I think that we have to acknowledge the idea that we have a purpose in this season of life. And our purpose is not fear, it's not anxiety. So I think that it's crucial for us to move past our fear and anxiety because there is a purpose for this season of life. And maybe we've never faced anything globally like this before, but the reality is that life is filled with sharp turning points. I want to read a story today from the book of Exodus, then we'll get into the book of Numbers. If you have a Bible there at your house, go ahead and grab it and turn to Exodus and in the book of Numbers. Of course, it's all on the Timberlake app or in the comments below. There are notes. But the story starts out with Moses, and Moses is 80 years old, and he's working for his father-in-law Jethro, herding sheep. It's about the weirdest sentence of all time, but times were tough, right? Just a young man, young 80-year-old Moses, is working for his father-in-law, and he's out in the wilderness, and God appears to him in this bush that's on fire, but it's not burning up. God gives him this job to return back to his former home to rescue 2.5 million Israelites out of Egypt, out of captivity. We're going to pick up in Exodus chapter 3. In verse 10, it says this: "The Lord said, I've indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I'm concerned about their suffering. So I've come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey." Now skip down to verse 10. "So now go. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." The Israelites at this time have been slaves for the last 400 years in Egypt. God's plan is to use Moses to free the captives. Of course, Moses objects with all of his excuses and reasoning, and for the most part, they're all valid excuses and reasoning. But like God does, he counters Moses' excuses and objections. We won't get into the whole story. It's filled with plagues and in a series of events and miracles before anything else happens. What I love about this story is that nothing happens overnight. Or rather, let me say it like this: I hate the fact that nothing happens overnight. Moses goes to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh keeps saying no to his attempts to free the captives until eventually Pharaoh says enough is enough, and he allows them to leave. The problem is that they had been in captivity for hundreds of years. There was no, I'm homeless now, so I'm going to go back to my parents' basement until I get back on my feet. Because their parents and their parents' parents and their parents' parents' parents were all in captivity with them. So they're led out into the desert. And the desert was crucial. The desert was critical. God has a plan for them. The desert was critical. God's got a plan. So if God has a plan and we're in a desert, how do we get to the other side productively? We're in a desert. You and I are in a desert. How do we get through it productively? And I use that word productively because God's plans are never wasted. We believe that, right? That God saw this thing coming, that God knew this desert was in our future a long time ago. And so his plan hasn't been thwarted. God is not surprised by this. So how do we make it through the desert productively? How do we make it through without getting stuck? I've got 4 simple thoughts for you today. First one is this: how do we remain unstuck? We resist whining and complaining. Come on, did you feel the presence of God engulf your house just now? Resist whining and complaining. Have you done some complaining this week? I started to kind of catalog my complaints. It's very disheartening as I looked at the things that I was complaining about. For instance, I've been working home. I mentioned that, or from home. I mentioned that earlier. And I kind of caught myself complaining the other night. I got up from work and I went into the bedroom and I was talking to Shayna and I started to complain about the size of the space in our home desk where your legs go. Those are the things that I'm complaining about. Life is hard. The complaints are kind of absurd in this season. Or last week was Shayna's birthday. I got her a bunch of stuff in the wrong sizes and colors. And then all the stores shut down. Do you know how many times I've complained about the fact that my car is filled with inaccurate presents? We're complaining about the weather or of course things get more serious, that our jobs are being shut down. The schools are being shut down. We're complaining about the media or politics or empty grocery aisles. 2.5 million people are displaced. There's going to be tension. Why? Because they're asking themselves, how do we survive? Does that sound familiar? And still God kept providing. Does that sound familiar? God provided, and still the Israelites are complaining. The story progresses, and we get a couple books ahead, and we're in Numbers chapter 11. In Numbers chapter 11, in verse 4, it says this. It says, the rabble with them began to crave other food. And again, the Israelites started wailing and said, if only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish that we ate in Egypt at no cost. Also the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now we've lost our appetite. We never have anything but this manna. I don't know about you. I'm a grass is greener on the other side kind of guy. It's a fault. I'm working on it, I promise. But I've been through some terrible situations, some things, some seasons in life. And I have a tendency to look back on these seasons and think to myself, man, those were some good times. It's absurd. It's ridiculous. And then I have to correct myself and remember that I was in captivity. They were saying that things were better before we left Egypt, before God came into the picture. Here's the thing. It's okay for us to be frustrated with our circumstance. I think it's okay for us to be angry about the things that are happening around us, all the way up to the point that it negates the work that God is trying to do in us and through us. Which takes us to point number 2. You want to remain unstuck, you manage your emotions. Manage your emotions. Our circumstances alter the way that we feel, usually based on the timeline that we sit in them. Our circumstances change the way that we feel depending on how long we sit in our circumstance. It goes on in verse 11. He asked the Lord, why have you brought this trouble on your servant? This is Moses pleading with God. If this is how you're going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me. If I've found favor in your eyes, and do not let me face my own ruin. Moses looks at God and he says, God, if you love me at all, if you care about me, just kill me now. I can't go through this. I can't continually deal with this trouble that you've brought on me. God, you brought me here. If you care about me, just end it. Moses is at the bottom of the barrel. Again, God created our emotions. He understands them, and usually they're warranted. But they can also be our downfall if we're not capable of managing them. Over and over again in Scripture, we see these meltdowns. Good, godly men who are losing it. Elijah said, take my life, I want to die. Jeremiah said, curse the day that I was born. Job is going through the worst of the worst, and he says, erase the day that I was born and the night of my conception. Job is bringing other people into his death wish. But sometimes, I think that we're led to a point where all we have is this total dependence. Dependence on God. And then look what God says in verse 17. God looks at Moses and he says, they'll share the burden of the people with you so that you don't have to carry it alone. Typically, I think that when we look at God as a provider, we look at God as a financial provider. He's financially providing for us. And when we consider God as a provider, we only look at our financial situation. And we forget about the fact that God provides people. I was at Safeway last week before all the social distancing thing happened. And I was picking up a few things, and I picked up a loaf of bread. And I go up to the self-checkout line, and I'm standing in this horrendous line. This was right before, when all the panic was happening. And I'm standing in this horrendous line with a loaf of bread, and the lady in front of me turns around, and She says, oh, do they have bread again? Because of the apocalypse, there was no bread. And I look back at her and I said, some, they have some bread, sure. She turns around and almost immediately the lady in front of her turns around and says, oh, you need bread? Here, take one of mine. She had 2 loaves of bread. And immediately my mouth dropped open and I was like, man, I love this. I love this because we are in fact better together. God understands that now, and God understood it thousands of years ago when he told Moses that there will be other people that share in your burden. That's why we as a church are pushing connection. Because the more that you realize I'm here for you and you should be here for me, the more we start to understand that God provides, and he's providing us for each other. Here's number 3. Learn some lessons and lean into some new habits. You want to stay unstuck. Learn some lessons in this and then lean into some new habits. See, there's a problem that's still happening with the Israelites. They're still complaining. We're creatures of habit, right? One of the major reasons this has been so difficult for me personally, I can't count the amount of times I've struggled in the last 2 weeks because my routine is gone. I love routine. I function in routine. I do the same thing every day. I know what Wednesdays are supposed to look like. We're creatures of habit. I read a list this week of these things that we all do, but nobody likes to admit that we do them. I thought I'd share a few of them with you. I love the list. I'm only going to give you a few of them. The list was like 17 long, but it really helps solidify the fact that we're all in this together. The first one is this. We claim to read an entire book when you actually just started it, got bored, and then watched the movie or browsed the Wikipedia page. Quote, yeah, of course I've read Ulysses and War and Peace. Come on, we all do that, right? What about the second one? Cupping water in your hands from the shower, then dumping it out like a giant waterfall. I don't know if you do that. I hope that you do, because I'm going to tell you right now, I do it every day. Like, every day. I'm always concerned that Shayna's going to hear this gigantic splash in the shower. That's what it is. Here's the third thing. Maybe I'm being transparent or too transparent with you. Here's the third thing. Turning the sound down in your car when it's dark out and you're looking for a house, as if somehow that will improve your vision. We all do it. Don't deny it. Here's number 4. Saying Wednesday phonetically to help you spell Wednesday. No one in the history of time has ever been able to spell Wednesday outright. We all sound it out. Here's the 5th thing. Letting your dog know that you'll be right back when you walk away from the couch, as if they were curious and are now relieved. I'm confident my dog feels so much stress when I get up, so you always have to comfort them, right? You know what I'm talking about. We're creatures of habit. For the Israelites, their habit in this season of life was to long for a simpler time. Look at verse 18. It says, tell the people, consecrate yourselves. Remember, this is God speaking to Moses as a result of all of the complaining and the whining. He says, tell the people, consecrate yourself. That word consecrate means to make yourself separate or sacred. Consecrate yourselves in preparation for tomorrow, when you'll eat meat. The Lord heard you when you wailed, if only we had meat. We were better off in Egypt. Now the Lord will give you meat, and you'll eat it. You'll not just eat it for 1 day or 2 days or 5 days or 10 days or 20 days, but for a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils and you'll loathe it, because you've rejected the Lord who is among you, and you've wailed before him, saying, why did we ever leave Egypt? I feel like this is one of those face-flushed, busted moments, right? Like you've been caught. God was among you while you were complaining. And God's like, fine, you want meat? You're going to get meat. But you're not going to get meat for 1 day or 2 days or 5 days or 10. You're going to get it for an entire month until it's coming out of your nose. You're going to be so sick of it. At first read for me, I'm like, sounds great. Let's do it, God. Full month of meat. I don't think that was God's intention. So Moses looks back at God and he says, God, do we even have enough livestock for that? And then it goes on in verse 23. It says this in 23. The Lord answers Moses. Remember, Moses says, God, do we have livestock? God says back to him, this is the Lord's arm too short? You'll now see whether or not what I say will come true. Here's what I think we have to understand. Sometimes I think that we're so stuck in our routine, in our system, that we're unaware that God has something different for us. Sometimes I think God puts up with it, and then sometimes I think God says, you know what? You want all the meat? Here's all the meat. This is the time where we start asking God, God, what do you want from my life? How do I adjust in this season of life to be on God's schedule, to be on God's plan, to listen to the heart of God, to listen to the voice of God? What does a better prayer life look like in this season? What does putting God first in my finances actually look like, even though my finances are fluctuating right now? What does my worship look like? How do I serve other people in quarantine? I read a blog this past week about the church and what the church looks like, after all this is done. And of course, no one actually knows. I think that everyone speculates about tomorrow. We're in a season of uncertainty. But so much of this article revolved around the fact that prior to this, church was a Sunday gig that boasts of being everyday Christians. But right now, we're altering our lives to have to be 7-day-a-week Christians. Listen, you can't sustain yourself on a 45-minute video that pops up on Sunday mornings. I wish you could. I hope you're getting something out of it, but we cannot sustain ourselves on simply just this. I think the biggest thing that we have to figure out right now is how do we come out differently on the other side of this? How do we want to come out differently on the other side of this? For me personally, I want to be different. I want to be better. I want things to have changed on the other side of this thing. So how do we do it? Here's number 4. We decide what's next. We decide what's next. Here's what we don't know. We don't know when is next, right? We don't know when's next, but we can decide right now what is next. For me, I want to be better. Let's fast forward the story. Joshua succeeds Moses. In Joshua chapter 24, he's speaking to the leaders of the tribes of Israel, and he says to them, you need to get rid of your history. Listen, God brought you out of slavery. God brought you across the Jordan River. He brought you through Jericho. You need to get rid of the gods that you worshiped before this. You need to forget about the gods of your ancestors and who they worship. Fear the Lord. Serve him with all of your faithfulness. But then he adds this but in between that and what he's about to say next. He says, fear the Lord, serve him with all your faithfulness. But you don't have to. He literally says, if that seems undesirable to you, then fine, don't do it. But you've got to choose. On this day, you've got to choose. And then he says, but for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. Joshua's like, listen, I want you to serve God. He's a good God. I mean, look at the things that he's brought you through. And we can even do that right now. Look at the things that God has brought you through. The seasons, the storms, the trials, the deserts that we've walked through. You don't have to. But just know for me and my house, we're going to. The number one way I think that we stay unstuck in this situation that we are stuck in is to say, God, what do you want from me? And then we make a decision on whether or not we're going to jump on board with serving God. Listen, we don't have to. You don't have to. You don't have to turn into a 7-day-a-week Christian. But I think that we need to. As for me and my house, we're going to choose to serve the Lord. Listen, I don't know where you're at, physically or spiritually today. What I do know is that for me and my house, we're deciding, we're choosing to serve God. Maybe today you've not done that. Maybe you've not yet made that decision for your life or for your family. Today can be that day. Wherever you're at right now, if you'd be willing to say, I want that. And again, I don't know where you're at. I don't know what that looks like for you. One of the coolest things about salvation and a relationship with God is that he went through something horrible. Jesus Christ hung on a cross for our sins so that this moment can be way easier. And you can make that decision from the comfort of your own living room. You can make that decision right now, laying in your bed with your kids, eating breakfast. If today you'd be willing to say, you know what, I want that. I want to choose God today. Listen, whether you know it or not, He's been faithful to you. If you want to just say yes to Jesus, if you want to choose Jesus today, maybe you're for the first time, or maybe you've walked away, you've stepped away, and today you just need to say, God, I want that again. I want to live a life for you. Just begin to pray this prayer, just right where you're at. Pray this prayer with me. God, thank you for forgiveness. Thanks for salvation. Thanks for what you did on the cross for me. Say, God, thank you for taking my death and giving me life. God, come into my heart, change me, shape me, and mold me into the person that you have called me to be. And then just say thank you. Just say thank you. God, thank you so much. Lord, thanks so much for being a good God, a God that cares for us, that is mindful of us. God, thanks for comfort. Thanks for peace in the desert, through the turmoil, through the uncertainty. God, I pray in this moment that you would help us to start recognizing our purpose. God, in this moment, we begin to say, yeah, that's me. I want to be a part of what God is doing. God, that we would be making decisions even right now in this moment, deciding to live lives that represent you, that push you, that further your kingdom and your agenda, God, so that we can continue to make heaven more crowded. God, thanks for allowing us to be a part of this with you. Lord, we love you so much. We love you so much. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Well, hey, if you prayed that prayer a second ago to say yes to Jesus, I'm going to ask you to do one of two things. The first one is this. You can go online to Timberlake website, or you can go on the Timberlake app and you can fill out a connection card. And on that connection card is a box that says you've committed your life to Jesus. The second thing that you can do is text the number at the bottom of the screen and just tell us your name. It's a designated number specifically for this, but we want to come alongside you as you begin your faith journey. Thanks for watching today. Don't forget that next week is Easter. We're going to do Easter just a little bit differently. I hate that we don't get to meet face to face, but we have 3 service times next week. Here's what I would love for you to do. Check into one of those services. Comment along in the comments below. Invite some friends. Tell some family. Let's make Easter just an incredible weekend. Here's the other cool thing that we're doing. Typically, we do a massive Easter egg hunt. This year, we don't get to do that. However, we stuffed 10,000 eggs in preparation for Easter. We can't have you come here and have an Easter egg hunt, so we're going to send the Easter eggs to you. This week, check social media for time and day, but this week we have pre-packaged all of our Easter eggs for you to have home Easter egg hunts. What we want you to do this week, pick up a bag. It's drive-through, just drive through, grab a bag, and then post your home Easter egg hunts on social media. Tag us in it so that we can all be a part of Easter egg hunts together. It's gonna be good. Make sure you're here. We've got some unique thing planned for next Sunday. I love you. I miss you. I absolutely cannot wait to see you. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, and hopefully we see each other very, very soon. All right, bye, church.